Hello, my name is Maxwell Monroe, and this is my informative speech from a public speaking class. Grief is something that's maybe hard to understand until you personally experience it. So I'll be trying to explain the stages of grief today, because everybody's going to experience grief sometime in their life, and I personally wish that I had known more about it before I had to face grief. I really just felt confused and like I didn't know if I was handling things the way I should be. So the stages of grief are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. There's not really a correct order to how you experience this. It's more just kind of maybe you experience bargaining first, or maybe you experience depression first, and maybe you experience anger last, because it just kind of comes out random. It can also be kind of described as like waves, because like waves, sometimes there'll be weak waves of you experiencing one of the stages of grief. Maybe it'll be really intense, and it'll come back at random. So once you're past the stage, it doesn't mean it's gone forever, because grief kind of sticks with you. The first stage of grief is denial. So this is where you might be believing that like something's wrong with this situation you're experiencing. Like if you're terminally ill and you just find out your diagnosis, you might be thinking that, oh, the doctor misdiagnosed me, or the doctor's thinking of somebody else and just went into the wrong room or something like that. This is kind of like a preferable reality, which is basically kind of a delusion you're telling yourself, versus the actual reality, which is that you have a terminal illness. Denial is the body's natural defense mechanism. The best way I can explain it personally is by using, like, let's say there's a big wall in front of your brain, and there's a very small hole, and a lot of grief starts coming at you. A lot of it hits the wall, and only some of it goes through the hole. So it's kind of like keeping it away so that you aren't experiencing everything all at once and just becoming a mess. Gregory puts it as, instead of becoming completely overwhelmed with grief, we deny it, do not accept it, and stagger its full impact on us at one time. The next stage is anger. So this is where you might be feeling sympathy towards yourself. You might be thinking, this is so unfair, or why is this happening to me? Or like, what did I do wrong? What did I do to deserve this? And you might be looking for somebody to blame during this time. You might be blaming your family for not noticing the first signs of your illness. You might be blaming your nurses for not taking care of you. You may blame the doctor for diagnosing you with what he did. The next stage is bargaining. So this is where you're going to start feeling like false hope. Like, oh, maybe this will pass. Maybe I'll actually get better. And it just doesn't happen. People sometimes turn to higher beings and try to bargain with them. Like, hey, if you help me get cured, I will be the best person I can be forever. I'll donate to all these charities. However, it's not going to happen. And this point is where you also might be thinking about what if scenarios, like, what if I had been more healthy? What if I had been put in the hospital sooner? What if I had a different doctor? It's kind of just trying to think of alternate things. And then there's depression, which is kind of like the most widely accepted stage of grief, because it's what people think of when they hear grief. They think of sadness. They don't think of all 5 steps. This is kind of like the beginning of accepting what's happening to you. You're feeling empty, feeling miserable. Your mental health might be declining at a rapid rate. But this is because you're acknowledging that, like, yeah, I do have a terminal illness and I can't really do anything about it. And then the last stage is acceptance. So one thing it's not is you're not getting over it. You haven't gotten over the fact that you have a terminal illness and you're not okay with it. It's that you're accepting this new reality. So now you have to learn how to continue living on with that knowledge. You have to just move on as best as you can without actually moving on, because that's not a thing that people can do. As Kessler puts it, acceptance of the new reality and beginning of learning to live with grief, which I think is a perfect way of wording it. So today I informed you about the stages of grief. It's not a linear experience. So the stages of grief, which are anger, denial, bargaining, depression, acceptance, they don't get experienced in that order all the time. It's different for everybody, and it's more like waves than an actual line. And when the time comes where you have to experience grief, it might feel impossible. You might not think you'll ever feel better, and maybe you're just trapped like this forever, but things will be okay. You're gonna be okay. It's gonna be a really long process, and you might feel like it's never gonna change, but it will, and you can get better. Thank you for listening to my speech.